So we have 5 questions that we're going to be asking, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. But please type your questions into the chat once we go through these questions. So the first question is, what advice would you give students that are questioning what career path to take? And we'll go in the same order as we did with our introductions. So Sharon?
Sure. So, it's interesting because I knew that I wanted to go to law school when I was 12. And that is probably unusual for a lot of people. I didn't even know what a lawyer was, really. No one in my family was an attorney. I just knew that if I wanted to help people and correct injustices, then I had heard that that's a degree and a path to follow. And what really prompted this was when I was 12, I was at Pyle Middle School, for those of you all that live in Montgomery County and know that area. And I'll never forget the one incident that happened with me. So I was a group of friends that I had from elementary school, and all of a sudden, people stopped inviting me to their birthday parties. And I was the black girl in the group, and my mom actually asked me about going to parties, and I said, well, I don't know why I didn't get invited. I heard of so-and-so's party and I wasn't invited. And so she said, well, you should ask her. So I did. And she said, well, my mom really said that that we shouldn't play together anymore. And I said, why is that? And she said, well, because most of my friends are Jewish, and and you won't be coming to my bar mitzvah, and so there's no reason for us to really hang out. And so that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was I got called a nigger for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I ran home to my mom and asked her what that meant. No one had ever said that to me. I thought I was just like everybody else. I didn't even know that there was like skin color differences, because in my family, we have, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, as well as, people my complexion. And my mom's dad was white, Irish, red hair, blue eyes. And so it never occurred to me that there was something different. Mm. So I started reading all I could read about being an attorney, and civil rights was the thing that I was most interested in. And I was so excited to continue following that path. And my first job was as a civil rights attorney. So in terms of questioning the career path, I think that things happen to us in life that say that challenge us and cause us to think about what we want to be and the causes that are important to us. And for me, after I made that decision, or thought I made that decision, I just did as much research and reading as I could about it. I asked my parents if they had any friends that were attorneys that I could talk to. And so I think that the whole networking, and I was really, really conscious of finding internships, et cetera, that were in the legal space, because I was hyper focused. And I think that in some ways that focus caused me not to think about other career paths. And so my advice would also be to explore, different areas that you're even thinking about, that even came across your mind, that you met a person who was in a particular area and you said, wow, I wonder what that would be about. And I didn't do enough of that. So that is some advice that I would offer, that yes, it's great to be focused. It's great to have an incident that happened that propels you to do something, on the other hand, be really open-minded and do your research about a variety of things that are even related to that area.
Thank you, Sharon. Karla?
Yeah, so just to restate the question, what advice would you give students that are questioning what career path to take? And just like Sharon, I'll share a little bit about my story. As I mentioned, I'm from Guatemala. My family came in 1981. We were fleeing political persecution in Guatemala, but did not earn political asylum until 1986. So we were undocumented for about 5 years. And my family, while they had some college from back home, they were doing whatever survival jobs they could do for the first 10 years. And so we got political asylum in 86, and I graduated high school in 91. So we were just coming out of the shadows here as I was getting ready to graduate high school and enter college. I remember talking to my high school guidance counselor and said, I wanted to be a school psychologist. I don't know, I thought psychology was interesting. I like kids. And he said, you'll never get a job. There's so few opportunities there. Think about doing something non-traditional. I don't know why I listened to him. I think I had very little guidance. And so the psychologist told me, the counselor told me, don't go that route. So I started to think of other things to do, but really didn't have. I went to Florida State University because a friend was going there. No real good research. I got in, took out a fair amount of loans, I said I was going to be a physical therapist. And then when I got there, I learned that there isn't a physical therapy program there. Terrible research. Mm-hmm. So I would have to get a biology degree and then get a master's degree in physical therapy. So I was really discouraged. And I think part of the point of my story here is for students that are in this situation, just really seek out the resources. Every college, every community college has people that can give you more guidance and support. You don't have to feel like you're doing this alone, which was my experience. So then I just started dabbling in everything. So I tried nursing. I saw a picture of the nurses in the hallway with their little white hats. I said, no, I don't see myself doing that. And then I got recruited to do a program for women and minorities in the sciences. And I got in. It was a fabulous experience. I mean, Florida State is a huge school, 60,000 students. So to be in a small cohort of minorities and women in science was fantastic for me. So I ended up getting a great education, ended up getting a bachelor's in biology, not really knowing what to do with it. But I forgot something. Before that program, I was recruited for a pre-med program, again for minorities and women. And my grades were pretty good, but I was kind of on the borderline there. And I got a bad grade in, I don't know, organic chemistry or something, or physics. And I said, they're not going to want me in now because I got a bad grade in that class. So I took myself out of the program. I stopped going to see the counselor for this program because I thought, I screwed up. My grades aren't good enough anymore. I'm going to take myself out. Again, huge mistake. And that's something I would tell students now. Do not take yourself out of the running. Let them kick you out if it comes to that. But in retrospect, now knowing what I know today, they probably would have given me a second chance. They would have given me more tutoring. Anyway, that wasn't the path for me. So ended up graduating with a biology degree, and I worked in a marine biology lab. Tons of fun. We did field work in Vancouver Island, underwater scuba diving experiments. Didn't pay much. I think I was making $18,000 a year. And my mother said, you went to college and you're making $18,000 a year? So that was hard to explain to mom. You know, when you come from a low income background, they're like, you could be working at the grocery store and making $18,000 a year.
Right.
So in the meantime, I started to, again, through my college, I found the Office of Service Learning and got connected with them. And we started going out into the migrant community. This is Tallahassee, Florida, you know, borders with Georgia. So we started going to South Georgia to teach English to migrant workers that were picking, you know, tomatoes and all kinds of vegetables in South Georgia. And I fell in love with teaching English as a second language. It was some of the most rewarding work I have ever done. Again, I didn't know anything about teaching. Resourceful college grad, right? You found some materials, you knew there was a passion there was a love of the community. And so, again, that's another advice I would give students is volunteer. You know, use the Office of Service Learning. That's a great way to dabble in different areas to see, you know, you give your time, but you're really learning about what those fields are about. And there's great opportunities while you're still in college. So I was at the microscope at work for like 5 hours straight, doing the samples that we have to bring back from the field. And I had an aha moment where I thought, wow, can you imagine how much we would have accomplished with the community if I had 5 hours to work with them at one time? And that was my aha moment. I thought, so why am I spending my time here if that's where my passion and my love is? So while I was still in Tallahassee and I started taking classes as English as a second language, and the sciences are awesome. But when I was in my first TESOL class, teaching English as a second language, I could feel the energy, the love. I just felt like, oh my God, I love this. I love the content. I love to study it. This is where I belong. And so after 4 years of the hard sciences, I finally found a subject matter that I truly believed, this is for me. This is where I want to go. So long story to say, good lessons learned for students. Seek the help. You're not alone. Never take yourself out of anything. You know, they're going to have to kick me out next time, but never again will I take myself out of the running. And volunteer. Volunteer in order to get to know different areas so that you're not surprised when you're in a program of study or in a job that maybe you didn't think it is what it was. So thank you.
Thank you, Karla. Lupi?
Yeah, I would say that I know oftentimes as as students are sort of learning, they find themselves trying to figure out where to go for advice. And so you have to really work to being proactive, and it's a skill. And oftentimes networking is not something that comes easy to everyone, but you have to really be intentional about your efforts. And so some practicals are start with your advisor and make sure you're having conversations about where you're potentially bottlenecked. And I know words matter. Similar to Karla's story, when I had like a 3.6 and I had done every activity under the sun because I thought that could get you scholarships. Once again, first generation, you're sort of going by what you see others doing, what you're hearing, what you're thinking is supposed to work. And so, when I said that I was going to go to a 4-year college, I was discouraged and told that I wouldn't get in, basically. And I didn't listen. That's good. Not that, I had my mindset on specific school, and I was able to go to Goucher College, small liberal arts college. I was looking for small classes because that's what one of the moms from one of my friends had recommended. And I was in every activity in the sun in high school. So she was like, you need to stop all of that. She's like, you need to focus. You can't be in every activity, and you have to really, do your best in college. And so I kind of took that, and I was eager to get advice, but it's like sometimes you want to get it from the right people. And I think what's important is when you're not recognizing what to do is you have to surround yourself with motivated students that can also encourage you. But the networking piece is really critical that comes up, because you'll be able to listen what other people are doing and sort of see if that's something for you. And to Karla's point, like, it's great for you to volunteer and to sort of make that effort, because you're able to recognize if there's something that's for you or not for you. If you like being outdoors versus can you be at a desk? Like, you're starting to explore what that could look like, those internships. And I can assure you that as you put one foot in front of the other, opportunities come because people see how you work. So every opportunity that you can access around an internship, volunteering, interviewing people that you know have a certain profession you might be interested is another one. If you feel like law might be something, ask what type of law. I've had friends go into it and they're like, what type of law? Or if you feel like it's engineering, like, who do you know? And start to really wind that circle of names so that you're able to explore what that looks like, what coursework, what is it that you need to be doing to prepare yourselves. So many, when I was doing Upward Bound, students would say they want to do sciences, but hadn't really focused on the sciences. They wanted to be doctors. Everybody wanted to be a doctor, but they had not taken the sciences they weren't preparing and understanding what that meant. So it's really important, like, to just explore, to really put yourself where you're talking, in really seeking to understand. So I think that's kind of, for me, like, that's been, I was never like embarrassed to ask for help. I think that's a good thing. I didn't care. But I think that really, really helped me to see people that really had my best interest, and they could also see where my gaps were and sort of really kind of encourage me along the ways. And I think too, it could be discouraging when you don't get encouragement from people that you respect, and that's going to happen. But I think this is why it's important that you're proactive and you don't give up. And what one person may say that is not encouraging, that's not everyone. And you have to be able to put yourself out there and talk to teachers that you've done well with, even in high school, and go back and some say, this is where whoever is it that you connected as an adult that gave you good advice, keep that person in your corner so that you can reference them at different points where you need support and you're sort of like in this crossroad where you're trying to define what to do. I think too, like, I'm always, my daughter, Karla and I were talking about, we have seniors who are going to college next year, and 17, 18, like, when I look back, you don't know a lot. You're still a lot to learn. So that process, enjoy it. There's no shortcuts around hard work. And so I just encourage that you do everything and you put your best effort with everything that you do. But definitely make a list of people you respect, that you hold dearly, that you're like, what is it that they do and how did they get there? Did they always know that they were going to do that? Mm-hmm. You'll get some really interesting stories and really interesting journeys, and it will make you feel a lot better and understand that your journey is yours and you can own it.
Thank you. The next question, what does empowerment mean to you, and how do you empower yourself and others?
Wow. So let me take a step back and then I'll go forward. One of the things that Lupi said that really moved me was around people that are in your circle. I have a mentee and she loves her friends that she's grown up with. And she has not taken the opportunity to meet people outside of that circle. And some of the people that she's with are real downer people. And one of the things that I feel about empowerment is taking the time to look for those motivated people, like Lupi said, and really just getting out of your comfort zone. It's so hard because particularly when you grow up in this area and you know, you have friends since, you know, elementary, high school, whatever, and they're hard to give up. And not saying that you have to give them up, but you do have to find some other people that are motivated. And you know, I had one of the things that really empowered me was my probably second week of college. I went into this, some friends of mine said, oh, there's a party or food or whatever at the New Africa House, and you got to come up there. And it was all the way on the other side of campus. And I went to school at University of Massachusetts, by the way, in Amherst, Massachusetts. And so I said, well, let me go over there one day. And I went there and I walked in the building and I felt like I was at home. I felt like, oh my gosh, these are my people. This is who I want to be with. I was inspired. The surroundings, the way it looked, the way the images that were on the walls, the artwork that I saw, I wanted to be there. And I felt like I was just empowered by being in that space. So sometimes it's about our spaces also. You know, we're working from home right now, right? And it's been a challenge trying to figure out where you're going to work. Are you going to work at the kitchen counter? Are you going to work at the dining room? Are you going to, you know, work in your bedroom? You know, where do you find a place? I carved out a nook that makes me happy and that makes me feel good. And so empowerment to me is really about being intentional about the places that make you feel good, that you can do your best work in. And when you take that, when you have that, it can propel you through the tough times. So when I empower myself, I try to surround myself with not only people, but things that make me, you know, feel good. And when I try to empower others, I try to do it in a motivating way as well. So my dean that I had in law school I love him. He has been my forever reference. You know, I've been out of law school for a couple of decades now, and he's the person that I call all the time for a reference if I need it still. So finding a person and he was, you know, my chief motivator really in school. So it takes a lot of work. It's especially for people that are introverted or, you know, shy, to go find somebody that, and to reach out and find someone that you can talk to and reach out. But I tell you, I know that at Montgomery College, those people are there to be found. There are faculty members and student support services folks that are completely interested in your success. And I want every student on this call to identify, you know, 2 or 3 people that either you want to build a better relationship with, faculty members that you say, yeah, you know, I had a good spark with that person, or even someone outside of class, and really develop a relationship with that person or those people. And I think that would help to empower you.
Thank you. Karla?
Also wanted to blend a couple of the questions. Lupi mentioned, you know, using your network, and to want to remind students that professors are now part of your network. So use them. They are content area experts. They have their own network in different fields. So definitely consider professors at Montgomery College part of your network now, and going to talk to them about your interests and having them tell you about the field that they're in, you know, opportunities, job prospects, what they love about it, what they hate about it. Lupi's comment made me think about that. In terms of empowerment, I think when I think back as myself as a person in college, and a new immigrant and all that, I think something that was very important to me was discovering my own history. My family fled Guatemala. You know, one day we're there, one day we're here. Culture shock, learning English, the undocumented status. My family never talked about why we left. We were just here surviving. And suddenly I was in college. I took a Maya archaeology class at Florida State. And my teacher gave me a book of a now Nobel Prize winner, Rigoberta Menchú, about her story.
Yes.
And that was the first time that I understood what had happened in Guatemala and why my family is here. And ladies and gentlemen, it's the reason why we have a huge Latino population in the DC metro region. And so many of our young people don't know their story. So for me, a part of my own personal empowerment was understanding my family history. After I finished my master's degree, I went back to live in Guatemala for 2 years because I didn't know where I belonged. Am I Guatemalan? Am I American? I thought you had to be white to be American, and I wasn't. I didn't identify like that. So I don't know what happened. After being in Guatemala for 2 years, I came back and I just felt like much more comfortable with my identity and started to become, in my own mind, an American, accepting the fact that this was American as well. So for me, for my own personal experience, just knowing your roots, connecting with your background and your history is so important. And I think that was like the baby step in my own personal empowerment. In terms of, I think over time, empowerment to me has meant speaking up. I am an introvert. I am very respectful of others, and I don't like people that talk just to hear themselves speak. And so I often kind of reserve my thoughts until it's time. But then after a while, I thought, everybody else is talking. I should talk more often too.
Right.
I have important things to say. I have, the beauty of diversity is the diverse perspectives and background and ideas that we bring to the table. And if I'm not speaking, I'm not contributing as a diverse member of the Montgomery College or whatever community. So that has been important in my own personal empowerment, has been just making myself speak up. I have things to say, they're important, and people want to hear it. And I think that sometimes we think, no. Yes, I want to hear what all of you have to say, because I truly believe that we pay a lot of lip service to diversity, but one of the best benefits of diversity in my experience is just everyone brings something to the table, and all of our brains together are better than just mine. Let's see, how do I empower others? I think, encouraging others to speak up, to use their voice. I think that I am very generous with my network. So if you're with me at anywhere, I will always introduce you to everybody I know, because I know that networks are very important. I also try to be, use your power. So I am director of community engagement. I have resources. The community has needs. I think it's very easy to get caught in the day-to-day trap of just doing what you're supposed to do, but really challenging yourself to come up with things that are really needed in the community rather than just what's on your job description. And then just cutting through red tape. I think that's something that I see myself as empowering myself, others, and the institution. There's so much red tape. There's so many barriers that we create. And then we say, they're not registering, they're not coming. But we really have to empower others by really seeing through that red tape. And, there's that graphic of equity where you have the kids looking over the fence, when you put the stool so that they can reach the fence. I'm like, tear down that fence. Why do we really need the fence? So those are some of the ways that I personally have felt that I've become more empowered, and ways that I think of to help others find their voice and use power. We all have power.
Thank you, Karla. Lupi?
Yeah, I will echo that. Knowing your history or your own story, and it's really important. And it's interesting because in high school, every project that I could do, because it was I was in a program that was very world history, like history was a strong focus. I researched El Salvador because I wanted to understand the war. I wanted to understand what had happened. I knew that we also had come here as a result of that war that was just getting started in the 80s. And so, and then I researched people that I could look up to, like Oscar, the Bishop Romero. He was somebody that, because I wanted to identify with someone that looked like me. And it was inspiring to like just see his moral compass, but also just like that he stood up for the rights of the poor. And so just kind of like those things fascinated me. But that's I think it's part of all of us, and just how we are able to figure out what we connect with, and it gives you a sense of identity and purpose. It starts there at a very young age. But I think too, I've had some really hard lessons along the way. I think about empowerment. It's sort of the equity piece is it's more complicated. I think when you're going through it, you don't quite understand just some of the lack of access to resources, or things that aren't there for you. And so I feel a responsibility to make sure that as I connect with different people and women, for example, that I'm able to really share with them about, and encourage them about just how, I mentioned earlier about owning your story. And it's sort of like we all are writing our own book, our own chapters, the narrative. And we can't give up that power when we get discouraged, or we hold on to the negativity or the things that make us feel bad when someone doesn't even know us, and they may be saying things because they are uncomfortable with the perspective that might be brought to the table. And so you have to sort of get comfortable in your own skin. And I think that's been something that I've been learning in the last couple of years, especially being more in the leadership position. And I've also had opportunity to serve on the board of education for Prince George's Public Schools. But I think that I think of because I've read some of the comments. I had a staff that has been a from El Salvador. She was single mom, had one kid when she started with us, and she was at Montgomery Community College. And then she had to, I think, transfer to Prince George's Community College. However, initially she was honing on being a nurse, and she was working with us, and we were very supportive and flexible. And I kept watching this young woman. I saw how hard she worked. I saw how much she was working to be a role model for her daughter, and of course wanted to be really supportive. And along the ways, without wanting to be like, what are you doing? Like, you're really excellent with people, and like the social work piece. And it was just like this thing that where somebody had told her it was more worth it for her to be a nurse and she would make more money. So she was seeking that first before like what made her understanding what she was really good. She couldn't recognize it. She kept working with us, finished her 2-year associates, went for a 4-year college. In the meantime, she kept trying to compare her story to where other people were. And I think oftentimes we can do that and not recognize that when I say our story is different, I kept reminding her, you've had different resources and challenges. You already are successful. So sometimes what we define as success is based on like what you accomplish. But success is if you are holding it down and you're a single mom and you've been able to provide for your children and they're in school and they're getting that education, you already are improving the generations to come. So like be gracious with yourself. So empowering is about being able to have those conversations and understanding that it's not all going to look the same. My story against your story. And so being able to be gracious and supportive of one another. So she went on to get married, which is great. Had a couple more babies. She's now finishing her master's degree in a month. And she now leads our Prince George's site, runs the whole shebang, and is also an at-large appointed member to Prince George's school board. I share her story because that's kind of, I've been mentoring her, but like it's been more like, and I always say like, you sort of seek advice and you sort of are wanting to figure out what you're gonna do. But I say it's been you all along. It's been your hard work. It's been your perseverance. It's been the fact that you're so dedicated to, your daughter always wanting to have a good role model. Those things motivated her. So I share that because she would always compare where everybody else was because that was a failure. If she didn't finish college by this age, I'm like, baby, you were at home. You had, your parents weren't there for you. You were on your own since you were the age of like 13. You were 16 years old, you got married, and the story went on, and she shares this story, but I share that because mentoring is important for those of us that are in those positions, that it can't just be we're in those positions. We have to be able to also share and touch the lives of other professionals, because when we talk about equity and inclusion too, you don't see a lot of times, I think there's 3% CEOs that are Latino or maybe less. That's not, these aren't positions, there's a reason. And a lot of times we take ourselves out of these opportunities because it's uncomfortable and we haven't seen somebody else do it before us. And we're learning as we go. For those of us that are in certain positions, we are learning as we go. And that is very emotionally taxing. But that's why it's really critical that we continue to have those people that are in our corner to really encourage us and to really just continue to just say, keep doing it. Sometimes people have told me keep doing it, and my eyes just tear up. And I'm like, why am I tearing up? But it's because I think they really get, like I connect with that because I feel like they understand. So like, I'm keeping it real, but I'm also like, I'm seeing some of you, do not let someone discourage you on what you want to do. They don't know you. They don't know the purpose that you want to fulfill. So like, talk to the people, do your homework, do your research, and position yourself to do the things that are going to get you where you want to go. So it doesn't matter your age, because once again, you've already been successful. For someone that has written that they had 3 children and they put their kids first, you did the right thing. If you need to hear that affirmation, that's why it's good to have people in your corner, because sometimes we need those words of affirmation. So, so yeah, so definitely empowering is I think I continue to learn, even in the position that I am, the different phases in my life. Being a CEO for, it's going to be 2 years. I've never been a CEO. I've been with the organization 22 years. And there's a lot that I'm learning as I go about what is leadership? What is leadership leading a pandemic? What is leadership leading now where communities that we see, the needs are great. And it is up to us to pretty much serve these communities, because we're not necessarily getting a lot of other leadership anywhere else. So this is where it's going to be uncomfortable. And I have kind of been in this space the last 4 years. And I'm saying to myself, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, even if you don't know what you're doing. And then things will just continue to reveal themselves. And sometimes that's what we have to do.
Thank you. That was very inspirational. I'm very inspired right now. And I know a lot of our participants are also very inspired. Okay, the next question. What would you tell staff and faculty, students that want to advocate for others? How do they prepare themselves? How do you prepare for the role of being an advocate?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that, I try to take my experiences and be as transparent and authentic as I can in sharing them. And that in itself advocates for others. And when you're teaching or talking to other people about how to advocate, I think it's important to be vulnerable and, you know, share your experience so that others will change or that others will see a different perspective. And, you know, I've talked to people that were radically opposed to my way of thinking, and I shared my experiences so passionately that, you know, it may not have necessarily made them change, but it definitely caused them to pause. And I think that that's really important. I mean, I share some of the comments with, I share experience with some of the comments that I've read. And, you know, I am where I am right now. I'm at this pretty awesome job for me. It's, you know, great being a senior administrator, but, you know, I've been a single parent for a little while, and I have 4 kids. And not only that, I had a child when I was my first year in law school, and it was really tough not having anyone else my age having babies. None of my friends were having babies at 21, and you know, my marriage broke up 6 months after my child was born, and I had to move back home to my parents. Thank God I had them to move back home to. And I finished law school with in 3.5 years as opposed to 3, but I was really thankful to be able to finish even in that time period. And it was really tough. I mean, you know, I, in all transparency, I mean, you know, I needed public assistance. I didn't have, I couldn't really ask my parents because they had 2 other children they were supporting. The guy that I was married to kind of disappeared. It was really, really hard. And I don't share this story often, but I'm sharing it with you all on this call today because I feel it's important to share that journey and how you can go from something that's, you know, very adverse to having perseverance to get through that. And Karla, like you, I mean, I remember my first job at $18,000 and I had a bachelor's degree, you know, before I went to law school. So I think that when it comes to advocating and teaching people how to advocate, it's important to, you know, recognize your truth and stand up for that truth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So in terms of advocacy, I think that, you know, something that I'd like to talk about is something I see often is folks speaking for others. And it's fine, but something I would encourage folks to do is to bring folks along with you. You know, I think too often we say, you know, I'm here on behalf of the students and, you know, the students need this, the students need that. Bring some students. Have them speak for themselves. Everybody's background and experience is different. It doesn't have to be the best written testimony. But I just would caution to speak your own truth, but also be careful of not speaking for everyone because you think you know the topic really well or they don't have the time to come. That may be true, but I think we need to try harder to get the voice of the people that are affected before our elected officials, before our policymakers. And it's hard. It's hard. Sometimes it's true, people don't have the time to come up, or they're very shy and they're hesitant to come testify. But I see that a lot with my role at the school system, with the Board of Education. We hear from certain families, but not obviously not all of our families that are lower income or just have, difficulty coming to the board. And, I tell them, you don't have to come tell us about your school. It doesn't have to be a big policy issue. We want to hear about what issues are happening at your school, your experience. There's no right or wrong. It's your lived experience that we want to hear about. So, advocacy work, organizing is hard. It's easy to speak for others, and that's okay to a certain extent. But I guess my advice would be is to make the time, make the effort to have affected people come and speak for themselves.
I would say it's interesting for me, when I think back of probably when I started to understand more how do you advocate, I was a junior in college. And I didn't realize how other students all along had been engaged with their professors in challenging conversations about grades or what wasn't clear. I took whatever hits came my way and I accepted, I think, what I perceived was authority. And culturally, I didn't understand that that's also how in the culture you're used to respect, be respectful. So you can interpret certain things and sort of feel very shy about like having to speak up or challenge an adult. And so along the way I've learned, and I've had these conversations even with my children around how it's important that they learn to advocate for themselves, to do it respectfully, of course. And that, oftentimes we're being very clear about what we're advocating for. And so as we, so I lead an organization that's focused on youth development, and being able to do that self-advocacy, it's really critical. And a lot of our young people, they don't know what that looks like. And so to Karla's point, asking them what are the concerns and helping them articulate what that could be, why, it's sort of a teachable moment. And I think we all have had different experiences in understanding that not everyone understands what advocacy is really important. So I ditto about bringing others along. And I see it a lot too in education with our Latino communities. Often they're not going to challenge a teacher, challenge the system, because the teacher knows best. And so having created workshops where we created parents as leaders and have had where we sort of create sort of even tasks where we've had parents do series of workshops and then have parents lead it so that they can learn from each other and understand that they are contributors. What they have to say matters. We've done where we've asked parents to then, after the sessions are done, to go speak to an elected official and to coordinate that meeting and for them to sort of share their experiences of what's going on and what they see, what they observe. So we took them to Annapolis. We've done where we've encouraged them to take a PTA role to be on the Parent Teacher Association, which for them is super scary. I've done coffees where I've gone to visit the Latino family, the morning coffee, and they'll say, I'll contribute $5 because they will contribute. But they're like, and they were criticizing some event, but I was like, you realize it's the same 5 parents are organizing this event and you could really get involved and help with this event. And it's just like, but I just really uncomfortable. But you want to advocate that these things are happening for your school, you got to take action. So just having those conversations about what that looks like is really important because people, I think when they understand that their contribution really matters or their perspective matters and that is a value, I think that's how we're doing a better job to empowering our communities to speak up or to share in a safe space. And I think, you know, oftentimes when we talk about advocacy, we have to talk about creating that safe space to do so as well. And where people can kind of share and not be sort of judged by what they're saying. And I think oftentimes we have to look at, and when we're in leadership positions too, like, are we creating those space when people feel safe that they can share their perspective and challenge ideas or challenge, you know, authority, so to speak. That's not easy to do. So not everyone's going to step up to advocate if they have to like really process all that. That's very, that's a lot. But I think that bringing others along, creating those spaces for those of us that are in those positions, any place that we can create those spaces for others to understand why advocacy is important and why their contribution matters and how they can be an active player really matters. Understanding that makes the community as a whole. I think that's just, you know, upon all of us.
Thank you. We only have about 10 minutes left. So there was one question that was posted for Karla about a book you mentioned. And what was the name of the book?
It's Rigoberta Menchu's story. I'll write it on the chat.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? Okay, here's a question from Emily Block Rincan. What thought leaders have been instrumental in shaping your leadership journey? For all three panelists.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What thought leaders have been instrumental in shaping your leadership journey?
So for me, that's a great question. I read a lot, and I read a lot of books by women that I'm inspired by civil rights leaders that I'm inspired by, and I read my share of fiction. And I'm inspired by stories of resilience. I'm inspired by like reading for me takes me to places where I could never go or I haven't been. And so it opens my eyes up to what different places look like and different interpretations by people. And I'd be happy to share a book list of, I guess, my top 10. So I can put it in the chat, I think.
Great. Karla, you mentioned Rigoberta Menchú. Oh, there she is.
That's the book. It's called I, Rigoberta Menchú. It's a testimonial biography. Can you repeat the question?
What thought leaders have been instrumental in shaping your leadership journey? From Kimberly Block Rincan.
Thought leaders. You know, I think you wouldn't consider him a thought leader, but I think that I watched my parents' own journey, my father and my mother, and their service to the community, and that was a great model for me in my work. Of former county executive Ike Leggett, if you remember him, he was our county executive for 12 years. And before I ran for school board, I had this idea of what a politician was, like, you know, Bill Clinton, you know, this, this personality, super outgoing, a people person, charmer, eloquent. And here I was working when I worked for the county government, I was working for this county executive that was the opposite of that. He's introverted, he's quiet, real thought person. You know, he's a faculty member at Howard University, and effective. I think history will tell that he was a very effective county executive for this very diverse, prosperous community. And I think to me, that was a great example of, you know, leadership comes in all shapes, sizes, forms, and there is no one, there's no one cookie cutter for what a leader is. And so I think our former county executive, for me personally, was a real role model and motivator that I could be my own self and be a leader. I didn't have to succumb to these stereotypes of what elected officials are like.
Lupi?
So I would say I do also read Ken Blanchard. I do read him as well, and John Maxwell. I've read some of the leadership principles there. But I think, I've looked at, always been fascinated about the civil rights movement, and looked at Martin Luther King at a time where, just so much going on. And then you see Malcolm X, who had a whole different idea, and you see these leaders evolve within that time. And then you see James Baldwin, who I love the writing, but also how articulate he was in a time where I don't think I would have been very articulate. I would have been angry, and I would have just been very, I don't think clear-minded. And the way that I'm fascinated about how some leaders are so articulate and how they are very calm, cool, and collect. And the issues are very complex and very anguishing at the time. Like, anguish would have been the word when you have, so I look at these leaders and I'm fascinated about how they're more so that they're composed and how they're articulate, but they're really are key to putting out what's going on. So it's really, so I'm really interested in always in looking at sometimes where there's been turmoil and then people have been so articulate. Of course, President Obama is someone that I just have watched his different speeches and looked at his policies and just understanding how he navigated, like, inheriting a lot of challenges and still did it very gracefully in my perspective. So I look at those leaders, but then close up, a very close up experiences. Some of you may know Luisa Montero. She is the regional director for the, what's it called, Wheaton area. And she was my supervisor for almost a decade. And we call ourselves the yin and the yang. But then I had another, there was an SEO. She was, Lisa's from Cuba. Sandy is from New Yorican. I had these two different leaders of women that I'm looking at. Lisa was always cool, calm, collect. She is very, she's very thoughtful of a leader, and things could be really pressing, but she's very thoughtful before she acts. And I always watch her, and I was like, why are we doing X, Y, and Z? And she's looking at me probably like, just this little girl. And then I will look at the other one that was just more spicy in her approach of leadership. But they had very different strategies that I would watch how they would talk to staff, how they would engage, their approach to addressing challenges, crisis. And so it's just, I learned a lot from watching these two women looking at how to, like, lead other people and be very responsible and thoughtful. So, just really keeping that cool, calm, collect. You can see someone, but they could be really dying inside, and, like, sort of, how do you do that? And it's something that I've been trying, I've been working over the years, just trying to, like, what is it that I'm trying to say and communicate and articulate? Why is this important? And why does this matter? Or picking your battles, looking at the approach people have around that, and looking at the big picture when you're leading. What's it mean to be a visionary? Looking at how do you prioritize, and you sort of say discipline about things that you're going to say you're going to do, because things can come at you from all directions when you're leading, and the challenges are just multiple.
Okay, thank you. There was one final question. What book is on your nightstand right now?
So you want
I'm currently reading Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Dreams. I do one fiction, one nonfiction. Before that, I read the Catherine Graham book she's the previous owner of the Washington Post. That was some serious 700 pages of historical autobiography. So I'm enjoying my nonfiction break with Barbara Kingsolver. And I went to a used bookstore, and so a book sale recently. So I have quite a few, I love autobiography, especially of women. So let's see.
I'm reading this one, Where the Crawdads Sing. Great book. I'm almost
Looking forward to reading about Indira Gandhi. That's my middle name, and I don't know much about her, so that will be my next.
So I have Henrietta Lacks, reading that. I'm kind of almost done with it, Henrietta Lacks. And the other one I had just read was Just Mercy. I had an
good
opportunity
one.
to go to Alabama right before the book came out and actually visit the actual museum and the Peace Memorial. And so it was just really, I wanted to make sure I read it, and it was an incredible book. And you talk about leadership. He's amazing.
Okay, there was one question. I feel like many of my white family, friends, and colleagues are totally unaware of the bias and inequity and inequality that is out there for people of color. Where do I start with a conversation? We're running out of time, so if one person feels compelled to answer that question, where would someone start with a conversation in regards to bias and inequity with maybe white family members or friends in general?
I think it's great to start with your own personal story, and you know, your personal story. It's no one can negate where you're coming from, and I think that there's humility in these conversations, right? Around, in the sense of, it's not about shaming or wanting to make someone feel. It's about trying to get people to understand and to respect different perspectives. What depends on where is the disconnect that you're feeling, but if it is and sort of being clear with yourself what the goal is around that conversation with a specific friend and the depth of that relationship. How honest can you be? You have to sort of look at that, but I think sharing your own personal experience, your walk, it's a good one, because oftentimes people may not understand those pieces from you. Like, Karla mentioned about undocumentation. My story is very similar. So you could be, like someone may not understand. I've talked to so many other leaders that they don't understand a lot of immigrant issues. And if I share my personal story, they just really are like, man, that's you? Yeah, the story that you're hearing, that's my story too. And it's just more, it connects personally, like, because it's like they know me. And so now it's sounding, it's sort of different that they know me, and that's the story, and that's a similar story that they're hearing in the news. So I find that connecting that way can be helpful.
Thank you, Lupi. Well, I think we're going to have to end things now, and I want to again thank our panelists for being a part of Women Who Empower. And from the chat alone, you can see a lot of people have been inspired by the three of you. So we really appreciate your time. And I've put my email on the chat if there's any additional questions. Karla also put her email there. Thank you again, everyone, and enjoy this rainy day with your friends, family, or alone with your pets. And stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, take care.
Take care.
Thank you for organizing it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.